Hey, yo, Fro podcast listeners, help us out and click subscribe to show your support. And don't forget to shoot on over to our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast, to become a contributor to our podcast and help us out with whatever you can contribute. If you want to get your name in the shoutouts, if you want to get your name in our highlight reel, by all means, shoot on over to our Patreon page and become a Patreon of the Fro Wrestling Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of the Fro Wrestling Podcast. This episode, we have the fan voting launching right this second for round 3 of our tag team tournament. You guys are doing an amazing job so far. Rounds 1 and 2 have been nothing short of awesome. I got some people who are really stressed out with some of the teams that remain. And as a side note, in relation to the Patreon page, the people who sign up for the Patreon page, you get live voting open a few days early. Live voting for patrons of the website is going to launch on Thursday nights rather than having to wait till Saturday. If you want to get in, have a few extra days to take your time and go through the picks, that happens for all of our patrons. They go live on Thursday nights. As we go through the show, feel free to call into the Fro Wrestling Sound Off line, 267-642-1160, and give us your questions and comments through our talk-to-text service. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can throughout the show. If you want to get started live with the fan voting, the links are all live right now through either the direct site, which is frolifeplanning.com/fan poll, or you can go to our new page, frolifeplanning.com/Fro Podcast, where you'll see big updates on big news stories. You'll see a link to get into the tournament page. You'll see the links for our different sponsors, the people who have contributed to our successes so far. And then you'll see our interview series, all the different interviews we've done in the last few months. Those are up there for you, so they're quicker, easier access rather than scrolling through 100 and some episodes trying to find your favorite interviews. So by all means, go over, check that out, the frolifeplanning.com/Fro Podcast. That is where we'll be housing the majority of our content from here on out. Just as a side note, before I get going with everything I had planned for tonight, I got to share with all of the listeners. I actually got an opportunity today to go with a good friend of mine to a show in Quakertown, Pennsylvania at the Quakertown Farmers Market, which was an outdoor free show from the Worldwide Wrestling Alliance. That is an organization based out of Hatfield, Pennsylvania, run by a gentleman named Dino Santa, and it was actually a lot of fun. I mean, clearly not WWE production, but they did a pretty nice job, especially on such a beautiful day outside. And the cool part for me, I got to meet and say hello and shake hands with WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana, who was in the ring performing in their main event today, and even at his ripe old age, still able to move very well around the ring. Didn't get to see the flying forearm, would have been nice, but at the end of the day, I was very happy with the show, especially for free. How can you argue with a free show? But they actually did a pretty good job. Clearly, some of their talents really need to work on how to sell moves, and some of their talents need to work on actually hitting their punches a little closer so they're a little more believable. But in the end, thoroughly entertaining, and I'm really thankful that an organization, a small company like that, is going to contribute to the local wrestling scene where I'm at, and hopefully some other people can get out to see it. They are going to run shows, I believe they said the 4th Saturday of every month at the Quakertown Farmers Market. They already run shows at Zern's Farmers Market, which is a little bit further for me, but hopefully not so much for you, and if you're in this area. And if you're not in this area, by all means, because I know we have listeners all over the world now, and I don't want to sound like I'm just a local guy, but if you have independent wrestling in your area, by all means, go check that out, because a lot of times, those are the companies that get scouted for talent for bigger promotions, and then they get scouted for bigger promotions. It's like a daisy chain effect or a domino effect, where a lot of the smaller talents make their way through and eventually some of them get to the big time. I will share with you that this same company, WWWA, was the first time I ever saw Tommy Dreamer perform, and he now obviously is an international star, but I saw him long before ECW. He was still in the suspenders and the goofy outfit. He was tag teaming with Rockin' Rebel back in like 1992 or something like that, but you know, very cool that I got to see somebody. I got his autograph and everything way back then, and then he turned into something important. So get out to some of those local shows if you get the chance, because it can be a lot of fun. We're going to get things started tonight with our tournament. We do that every episode. We try to have a conversation about what to expect in the next round. As some of you are finding out right now, as you go to the contest or the voting, the survey lines, some of the matches are getting pretty good. We're getting into where, we're round 3. A lot of the junk has been weeded out. Not all of it. I'll be honest with you. There's some teams I can't believe are still alive in the tournament. I will highlight in this episode the matches in each block that I think are the most intriguing, most challenging to vote for. Starting with this the first block, the APA taking on Demolition. So you've got a tag team, both tag teams known for being extraordinarily brutal, tough tag teams, especially during their time. When Demolition came out, they were virtually unstoppable for such a long period of time. That's why they had such a long championship reign. There was nobody you could believe could beat them. And I don't think that they were made vulnerable, really, until the Road Warriors signed with WWE back in the early 90s. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, we have the carbon copy Road Warriors. Now we got the real deal. We better, make these guys into jobbers, and that's when Demolition's credibility kind of tanked. But before that, they were the thing in the tag team world. You name the tag teams that came through to WWE, the Killer Bees, the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldogs, the Powers of Pain, you name it, they went through them all right up until you got to that time when the Road Warriors hit the scene. But up until then, they were really dominant. And APA, known for their physicality, known for their straight-up fighting. And so this, to me, is a very interesting back and forth between two super physical teams. Naturally, with JBL going on to become a world champion at some point, some people in this voting process have been giving me comments like, I have to vote for this team, XYZ, because their members went on to be world champion, and the other teams, they always stayed mid-card fodder or whatever. I get that perspective, and I will respect whatever criterion you use to make your decision. But when I look at that match, I think that is a lot closer decision than a lot of other people would potentially. The next intriguing match in that block is D-Generation X, made up specifically of Shawn Michaels and Triple H, taking on The Shield. What a matchup. 2 guys who are guaranteed Hall of Famers, 3 guys who probably are on pace to someday be Hall of Famers, and I don't care what configuration of the Shield you choose to use for this, though I will tell you, this is just my opinion, when I thought about this, when I saw these 2 get matched up, the Shield only held the tag team championship in one combination, and that was Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. Dean Ambrose, if you remember, was the United States champion when they held the tag titles. So for me, if I was voting for this, that's probably the configuration I would go with, would be the Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns versus Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And that, again, is a match that is a lot closer than a lot of people probably give it credit for. The third one I want to talk about, I'm having so much fun with these big guys. So last round we had Akeem and the Big Boss Man taking on the natural disasters, Earthquake and Typhoon. Well, Akeem and the Boss Man have moved on, and this round they get to take on Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy. I don't know what you're going to do with this, but I'm enjoying seeing a battle of all these big guys, and coincidentally, all heel tag teams. It's almost like, WWE had a thing for, if you were a fat guy or too tall of a guy, you had to be a bad guy. None of these guys got to get over, except for Andre the Giant, who eventually became a bad guy. All the big monsters were all bad guys. So there was no good guy tag team to go against Akeem and the Boss Man. There was no good guy tag team to go against Studd and Bundy. You ended up having, in both of those cases, you ended up having Hulk Hogan team with somebody to try to even things out. At one point, Hogan teaming with Paul Orndorff till he turned on him. There was other times where Hogan teamed with Andre, but Andre eventually went bad. So curious to see what you guys do with that. Akeem and the Boss Man, the Twin Towers versus Studd and Bundy of the Heenan family. Let's get going with some of today's actual wrestling news, and then we're talking about the Hardys. So earlier this week, the Hardys have been rejected for their trademark request for the broken characters. Now that is huge because that is something that kind of swings the favor of the litigation between they and Anthem in Anthem's favor. Now, Matt Hardy had spoken out and said that he was going to basically up the ante as to how he was progressing with this legal situation and really go at it from another angle. I don't know what angle he's going to come at it from. Billy Corgan, we said last week, had been mediating some of this. And he is of the opinion that if Impact Wrestling wants to keep that character on lockdown, then it pretty much will be. I'm hoping that's not the case because the wrestling universe loves it. But I hope that Impact Wrestling understands what they're doing to their talent right now. You're telling every single person in your locker room and every talent that is not in your locker room that should you decide to come work with us, and if you come up with something phenomenal that really helps our company stay afloat or puts us in a great position, just remember, you don't own that. We do. No matter what you did creatively to create it, whether you had your son, who was never a contracted talent, perform and it created money for us, well, that's okay. It's still ours. Your father-in-law It's still ours. You know, TNA, Impact Wrestling, they are being ridiculous with this. I get you don't want to give WWE a leg up on something, but here's the truth. And I'm not trying to be rude here to TNA because I love Impact Wrestling. I do. I think I've been bragging about them quite a bit lately, especially with the talent pool that I think they have right now. But the truth is that the Hardy Boys will never come back to Impact Wrestling after what just happened with this situation. I don't see a scenario for that to ever happen again. So they're not going to make any more money from the gimmick. And what was already done with the gimmick, whether you do, you know, the crazy broken universe stuff, you know, the separate shows that they did, none of that is enough to create a DVD for or anything of that nature. So you're not going to make any more money, really, unless you want to launch a whole series of Broken Hardy gimmick t-shirts for people who aren't even in your company anymore. Then you're helping the competition anyways, because you're building interest in those characters despite the fact that they're not in your company any longer. But, you know, I would hope that they would realize the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is, yes, WWE stands to gain a great deal if they get their hands on the broken characters. I get that. But they are never going to be on WWE's level to begin with. So comparing yourself to something you could never be seems somewhat, you know, short-sighted. Just my opinion. I think they should let go. I think they should realize that you're sending a very bad message to your talent pool, that you're going to encourage people to not sign with you. Look, let's face it, right now, if you're a talent in the wrestling world, more people are going to be encouraged to go sign with Ring of Honor than they are you guys. You know, and a lot of that has to do with the way they're handling this particular situation. So I don't know. If it was my opinion, I would let the character go. But I'm not TNA, I'm not Anthem, and obviously they have no idea what they're doing. All right, we're going to move on to our next topic, because it is a busy show and I don't want to run out of time. Last week I got a little jammed up at the end. Oh, by the way, before I go off to the Hardys topic, as I just got done saying I wanted to move on, there has now been conversation that WWE does still have a concerted interest in this broken character situation, that they see it as a gold mine monetarily. I would not be opposed to that either. I think they can make huge sums of money, and TNA won't. And what are they going to do? Like, you're stopping WWE from making hundreds of thousands of dollars on one particular gimmick. If they don't get it from the Hardys, they'll get it from somewhere. They make stars like other people make dinner. I mean, it's just the way it is. So stopping them from one gimmick just seems so ludicrous to me. The other news tidbit for this section, former TNA star possibly making an NXT debut. For those who remember Impact Wrestling TNA, the talent they referred to as Gunner. Gunner had this great body. He had a great look. He looked like he was going to be something. There was a short period of time where it looked like he was going to be pushed into maybe a main event status. And then he kind of got stalled, and then eventually he disappeared from television, and we haven't seen him in quite a while. And to be perfectly honest with you, I actually really liked his package. I thought he had the look, he had the move set, he looked promising, and then just nothing. It's a lot like the way I felt about Crimson for a while, and Matt Morgan, like these certain guys that they never push the right way. And right now, they're doing with Eli Drake. By now, Eli Drake should have been world champion at least once. He's phenomenal, and they keep screwing it up, putting it on certain other people, and I'm afraid to see the same thing happen with him. But it would be a wonderful get for WWE if they can get Gunner. I think he has a lot of potential going forward, and I think WWE is masterful at picking up other people's cast-offs and showcasing the snot out of them. This is what they've done their entire existence. I mean, do you remember when Dustin Rhodes first broke into the business with his dad and did WWE, and he was going against DiBiase and Virgil and all that nonsense? When he left WWE, Vince let him go. He said, go ahead, go over to WCW, do your thing over there. You know, I think in one of the documentaries he says, you go over there, let them get you over, and then I'll steal you. And I think it was the Dusty Rhodes DVD, and he's like, and that's exactly what they did. And they did. That's what WWE does. They'll let somebody go elsewhere. They're not gonna make it seem like the company revolves around one talent. John Cena, Roman Reigns, maybe, but otherwise no. And then, you know, they'll just wait. Your contract will run out. They'll bring you back. Look at the Hardys. The Hardys were gone for how long? They come back. They're instantly megastars. Instant. So I hope they do good things with Gunner. It looks like I have my first question from One Man Band 05. He wants to know if I think WWE will ever let Hulk Hogan back in the company. You know, I've addressed this question a couple times with a couple people, and my opinion stays the same. WWE, professional wrestling in general, sports entertainment as a platform would not be here, or at least would not be the same today without Hulk Hogan. I'm not saying he's a ring general. I'm not saying he's a ring technician or some phenomenal talent. What I'm saying is Hulk Hogan did as much for this business as Vince McMahon or anybody else has. And with that being said, yet look, I will never justify the comments and the words used by Hulk Hogan. Lord knows, people who know me in my private life or in my professional life know I am a teacher. Many of my students are inner city students, multiple different cultural backgrounds, and I get very frustrated when people use ethnic references towards the students that I teach or their families. These are great people. I love the students I teach, and so I don't subscribe to any of that. At the same time, I try really hard to take a step back and look at this from the outside looking in. He said some things that he should not have said. But I think his daughter, he felt like was turning on him, and he took the low road, and that's something you should never do. You always take the high road. I'm not saying I forgive what he says, but I am willing to give him another chance. God, we got professional football players, this year in the NFL draft who beat women a couple years ago, and now they're getting drafted in the first round and going on professional football teams. Like, what is that? If we could do that, this guy, I'm not justifying anything, but he said some words. Other people are physically violent towards others and get to participate in their sports. I think for everything he's done positive, and with the outpouring of support he got when all that stuff broke initially, he had everybody from Kamala to, all these African-American stars, Booker T, other people coming out in support of him. That they didn't support what he said. But, you had Kamala saying, oh, he was never like that. You never would have known Kamala if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan. He did so much for me. Stuff like that. Those types of comments, they can't fall on deaf ears. They're just as important as what he said. So what I really think is, I think he had a moment of weakness. It's not something I necessarily forgive, but it's something I will deal with for the betterment of the sport that I don't want to say created, but he fostered in a way that it could not be any better than it is today without him. Let's look at some more matches. We're going into round 3 in the next block, and we're looking at a match that the early voters on the Patreon page, patreon.com/ProWrestlingPodcast, got to throw the plug in there one more time. Those people got to start voting, and I was already getting some flack for this. The Young Bucks taking on the Steiner brothers. To me, this is not even a match, but to some other people, they love this match. And I would love to see it. Don't get me wrong, and I don't mean today. I don't want to see Rick and Scott dust off the shoes and get out there and wrestle the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks should tear them apart right now. But Rick and Scott Steiner, say 1990, coming in and going against the Young Bucks now. Like, what a match. What a great match it would be. Can't wait to see what you guys do with that. The next match is the hardest match for me personally to vote for in this tournament because I'm a raving fan of two people in the match. I've been dying to see those same two people wrestle each other for the eternity of wrestling. It has not happened, and it looks like it never will, but it makes the match so intriguing, and that is a match between Sting and Lex Luger taking on Kane and The Undertaker, the Brothers of Destruction. I love Sting. I love The Undertaker. I would have given anything in the world to see the two of them meet up in WrestleMania. I actually really like Lex Luger and Kane as well. Not on the level of Sting and The Undertaker, but in a lot the same way. I probably would lean a little more a fan of Kane and Luger just for longevity's sake. But unlike a lot of people, I actually enjoyed Lex Luger's work. I did. I think if for those of us who were around long enough to remember seeing it, they had a match in the NWA and WCW called the Bunkhouse Stampede, and the Bunkhouse Stampede was where Lex Luger, he used to be a member of the Four Horsemen, and he broke away from the group and became a single star, and it was one of the final battle royals of the Bunkhouse Stampede where it came down to Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, J.J. Dillon, and Lex Luger in the ring, and it was an over-the-top rope battle royal kind of thing, and all the horsemen, Tully and Arn, were eliminating themselves, and it was just Luger and JJ in the ring, and they just thought he was going to give the win to JJ Dillon, and instead he grabs JJ and throws him over the top rope, and he becomes a single star. I loved it. And then for the next few months, he fights off the Four Horsemen, and Barry Windham ends up joining him and has a great feud with him. So Lex Luger, for as limited as his ring work may have been, I thought was very entertaining for a good chunk of his career. And I think when you look at this match, all four men, in my opinion, Hall of Fame quality, all four of them world champions, all four of them have held secondary titles, all of them have held tag team championships with each other and with others. So I don't care who you vote for in this. I think this is one of the best matches in this round. I really do. And it's one of the hardest ones for me to, if I was voting, unfortunately for me, I'm not voting. I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot by doing these tournaments because I would love to be voting, but I'm not able to because it just isn't ethical for me. But, gosh, I would love to be voting for that particular match because that's awesome. And the last one in this block that I want to talk about, Edge and Hulk Hogan, who, let's face it, we're not together very long, but their short tag team championship reign was meaningful for me personally because, one, they ended the reign of Chuck and Billy, who I thoroughly loved. I would have loved to have seen Chuck and Billy still in the tournament. They're not. But Edge and Hulk Hogan going against the legendary Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom. I strongly feel like I know how this is going to go, and I get it. I have no problem with it. I just want people to think for a moment about what we're seeing happen. We're seeing some really great combinations in this tournament come together and really get quality matches so early. We were only in round 3. Say, what are we at? About 64 teams or so? That's pretty impressive that we're already getting this quality of matches. Don't forget, if you're wanting to call in, leave a question or a comment for us, feel free to do so. The Pro Wrestling Sound Off line is 267-642-1160, and send us some of your thoughts. I'm waiting for that thing to light up because I'm not getting a lot of them. I'm getting more action on Twitter tonight, but it looks like I've got my first repeat comment person, and I only say that because I can remember the name because it caught me off guard. And I hope that doesn't offend you when you're listening to this, but Barry Harry Larry has sent a question. I think he was on 2 weeks ago. I love the name, Barry Harry Larry. But he's asking if I intentionally left out some of his favorite teams from the tournament, like the Southern Boys and Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow. No, Barry Harry Larry. No, I did not do that on purpose. Here's the thing. I wanted to put together a tournament that was as inclusive as I possibly could be. And I put out every team I could think of off the top of my head. And then when I ran out of teams and I didn't have an even bracket number and I didn't want to take anybody out. So then I literally went to Wikipedia and pulled up tag teams of the 70s, tag teams of the 80s, tag teams of the 90s, tag teams of the 2000s, 2010s. I went literally Wikipedia and I was going team to team to team and just filling them all in. And it got to be where I was at 256. And there was a handful more, and I was like, God, if I add one more, I have to add 255 more. So that was hard. That was hard. So we'll see. If I do another tournament, I would need 512 tag teams, to make it an even tournament bracket. I don't want to give anybody a bye in any of the rounds. I have somebody popping on the phone line saying, what do I mean, first repeater? I know. Okay, so I have 2 people in particular who have given multiple comments on the call-in line. I apologize. What I meant was, I get these nifty names attached to these Twitter people. When it comes in through the talk-to-text line, all I get is a number. And it's not actually your phone number. It's some random number they assign just so I don't get your private information. So that comes in. Yes, the gentleman who's making the call out has been on every podcast episode. And thank you so much for your support and your loyalty to the program. But I had to give a shout out to Barry Harry Larry. How can you not? Think of a name like that. That actually sounds like somebody I would have seen at today's show for the Worldwide Wrestling Alliance. Just saying. Oh, look, the guy said he's just busted my stones. That's okay. I have big stones to be busted. So, I'm going to move on now. A few more matches in round 3. We've got the Koloffs, Ivan and Nikita. Now, I have a ton of respect for their tag team, and when I tell you their opponents, you'll understand why I'm having a tough time with this one. I have the Koloffs going against Harlem Heat, Stevie Ray and Booker T. And here's why this is hard for me. Harlem Heat is one of the most decorated tag teams in the history of professional wrestling, one of the greatest teams you could ever ask for. And in a lot of people's opinion, Harlem Heat, it would not be surprised to see them in the finals, and I'm okay with that. I don't want you to think I'm trying to steer you away from or towards Harlem Heat. On the flip side, when I think about the Koloffs, when Ivan and Nikita were the NWA World Tag Team Champions, taking the championships from Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez, they were unstoppable. And here's the thing, I often reflect on tag teams based on their historical impact. So here's what I want you to understand. When they were the NWA Tag Team Champions, the Road Warriors were not in the NWA. The Road Warriors were still the AWA Tag Team Champions, and a feud with the Koloffs at one of the super shows between the two brands is what brought those two teams together and created instant magic. Everybody loved watching the Koloffs versus the Road Warriors. As a matter of fact, anybody who used to read Pro Wrestling Illustrated or Inside Wrestling or The Wrestler, in the backs of those magazines, there was always the advertisement for two different VHS tape sets. You had Lords of the Ring, and you had, I think it was the Great American Bash 86. For whatever reason, for the longest time, those two kept getting advertised, or maybe it was Greatest Bash Moments or something like that. But I remember one of the covers had a picture of the Koloffs and the Road Warriors. So that was the featured advertisement in all three of those magazines for an extended period of time, because the Koloffs got so much respect. Nikita Koloff was a legitimate threat, a big enough, tough enough, muscle enough guy to threaten the Road Warriors. And Ivan is just legendary. So when I look at that tag team, Nikita Koloff eventually would challenge for the world title. He'd be a U.S. champion. He'd team up with Dusty Rhodes and the Superpowers, who will come a little later in the tournament, and things like that. But when you really reflect on the Koloffs, I think sometimes people don't give them as much credibility because they forget what their initial impact was. They were the catalyst to launching the Road Warriors in the NWA. They are the reason the Road Warriors were over so much. In the AWA, the Road Warriors got over facing the Freebirds, especially that cage match where they came out with the stars and bars painted on their face. And then when they went to the NWA, it was the Koloffs. The Road Warriors didn't come in and go against the Rock and Roll Express. They didn't come in and immediately go against the Horsemen. They came in and they went against the Koloffs. And that's what set them apart. When they finished with the Koloffs, they faced the Midnight Express of Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey. That's where the Road Warriors got set up. So the Koloffs are huge in the history of wrestling. Please don't forget that when you're voting. I'm not telling you to vote for the Koloffs. I just want you to objectively really pro-con both teams. They both have their merit. The next match, Los Guerreros, Eddie and Chavo Jr. I got to specify that because somebody in the early voting was like, I don't know which Chavo this is. Chavo Jr., the one who's still wrestling, and Eddie Guerrero when they were the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. That's who we're talking about. Versus Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. Owen and the Bulldog still hanging in the tournament. I have no problem with that. I'm glad to see a team that really, and when you think about it, didn't perform for all that long, getting so much respect. I appreciate that, because that tells me you're good, solid, long-term wrestling fans who are really taking into account a whole body of work for some of these teams. And the next match, this one's hard for me, because I look at success and longevity versus essentially the career of the people involved. So I've got the New Age Outlaws, who took out Chuck and Billy in the last round, even though I really like Chuck and Billy. New Age Outlaws, you got multiple tag team championship wins. They're the ones who pretty much took out the Road Warriors. You know, they were the team that really ended the Road Warriors. I know they had spot appearances here and there on the independents, but their last major run, this was the team that took them out. They couldn't beat the New Age Outlaws. New Age Outlaws, part of DX, going against the Hollywood Blondes. Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was still stunning Steve, and Brian Pillman. You know, these two teams, in a lot of ways, very similar. I keep going back to that show I was at today. One of the wrestlers, a guy named Blitzkrieg, was coming out to the music that the Hollywood Blondes used to come out to. It actually drove me nuts, because I knew I was doing this episode tonight, and I knew the Hollywood Blondes were still alive, and just hearing their music got my juices going. I was like, that is not okay. That belongs to the Hollywood Blondes, which coincidentally WCW used for Mengen the Barbarian for a few weeks when they were the Faces of Fear, when they didn't know what the heck to play for their music either. But I digress. Make sure you're calling in, leaving your questions and comments on the Sound Off line, 267-642-1160. And with that being said, I got to get into some more of these matches in round 3, and I was thrilled and frustrated all at the same time. The Midnight Express versus Midnight Express match last round, the winners ended up being Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. I don't know how I feel about that, because I really hate to turn my back on Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey, but I get it. So in this round, we got the Midnight Express taking on Edge and Christian. Wow. I don't even know how to approach that match. And here's why. The Midnight Express, no matter what variation you're looking at, the Midnight Express have won tag team championships all over the place. They really were, during the territorial days, they were a tag team that transcended professional wrestling. They could go anywhere and draw heat. They can go anywhere and, as heels, be as over and as popular as any team in the world. And then you got Edge and Christian, who were the cool bad guys. Even when they were good guys, they still had a certain swagger about them. Even now on their podcast, they still sound amazing. So I keep saying this. I don't care who you choose. There's no loser in this match, and there's really no winner in this match. Like, they're so equal for me. But for me personally, I think the Midnight Express were around when tag team wrestling was a lot more in-ring and brutal in that sense. Road Warriors and stuff like that, Koloffs. Whereas Edge and Christian, they were there when the innovation of all the like chairs and ladders and, you know, all that kind of TLCs and all that became big. So hey, look, you do what you got to do. I have no control over what you guys vote for. I don't even know who I would vote for in that match. The next one I want to bring up, and I'm bringing it up, some people are like, why do you even care about these two teams? I do, because I think one of the teams, and I won't say which one of them really deserves to be considered one of the better tag teams of all time. And I know that's going to sound as a shock to some people, but I really believe that. I think if booking was different and there wasn't as many politics, they would have been multiple-time World Tag Team Champions. As it sits, neither of these teams were World Tag Team Champions, but they're both here. And that's Meng and the Barbarian, the Faces of Fear, taking on Samu and Fatu, the Samoan SWAT team. Actually, I should take that back. The Samoan SWAT team, when they went to the WWE, they became the Head Shrinkers, and they did win the WWE Tag Team Championship. So I take that back. And actually, bizarre enough, Samu and Fatu ended up teaming up with the Barbarian when he became Siuni, and they were like the 3-person Head Shrinkers. So it's really weird that they're matched up here. I hadn't thought about that before, but interesting matchup. Meng and the Barbarian versus the Samoan SWAT team. You know, go for it however you want, but I hope, again, a lot of people are more familiar with Meng and the Barbarian because they were a little more recent. The Samoan SWAT team split up, and Fatu really took off. He became Rikishi eventually, but he had runs as, you know, the Sultan and horrible gimmicks and things like that. But he eventually became Rikishi, so a lot of people would give more clout to him because of his Hall of Fame career. But I would argue, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but I would argue that the Barbarian, for as many places as he went and for as much impact as he made everywhere he went, even as a mid-carder, the Barbarian, if Nikolai Volkov is in the Hall of Fame, the Barbarian should be in the Hall of Fame. Just my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I won't hate you if you don't. I appreciate all my listeners. And the last one in this block, the Wolves, or the American Wolves. Eddie Edwards, Davey Richards, taking on the world's greatest tag team, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. What a amazing match that would be. I'd love to see that for real. For people who are just diehard fans of real wrestling, real just hardcore mat style wrestling, mixed in with a little bit of high flying stuff, this would be phenomenal. And it's one that we probably will never get an opportunity to see, but I would love just one time to see these guys get in a ring and really be given some time to develop a storyline and make something really special happen. I'm going to turn my attention to some of the other news tidbits from the week. Tommaso Ciampa, he's going to be out for an extended period of time. They thought it was just an ankle sprain. He went into that ladder match. DIY loses to the Authors of Pain last week at NXT TakeOver. He turns on Johnny Gargano and beats the living snot out of him after the match. You would think that would set him up for a major singles push, and they find out that his ankle's really messed up. So he's going to be out an extended period of time. 6 to 8 weeks is the early diagnosis. We'll have to see how long that takes. This is really a shame, because he's really about to pop. Like, his character is ready to take that next step, and then you have all your momentum just halted. You know, injury does that to people. Speaking of people who are injured, Zack Ryder, who's been out for months and months and months with his issue, he posted a tweet online saying that he hit his Rough Rider for the first time since he tore his muscle, and it looks like he's getting very close to a return to the ring. My concern is this. You know, when you have Mojo Rawley winning the Andre the Giant Battle Royal and has been invisible since, you know, the Andre the Giant thing really helped launch Baron Corbin. It's done nothing for Mojo Rawley. Are you waiting for Ryder to come back and pair them back up as a tag team? Because they're almost, at least physicality-wise, clones of American Alpha. And you already got American Alpha, and they're healthy. And they're not doing anything with them. So I don't really know what to expect once Ryder comes back. For himself, for Mojo, I really wish they'd start doing something with Mojo Rawley. Like, the guy's never going to develop if he never gets in the ring. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I want to update everybody on the New Japan Pro Wrestling Best of the Super Juniors tournament, the standings as of right now. I'll start with Block A, with the man leading the entire tournament right now. Last year's winner, Will Ospreay, has 8 points for Block A. In Block A, the remaining competitors, Dragon Lee has 6, Marty Scurll has 6, Ricochet has 6, Tai Chi has 6, Hiromu Takahashi has 6, Taka Michinoku has 2, and the legendary Jushin Thunder Liger has 0 points so far. So right now, Will Ospreay, if they ended the tournament right now, would come out as the Block A winner. His opponent has not been determined yet. In Block B, El Desperado has 6 points. Yoshinobu Kanemaru has 6 points. Raisuke Taguchi has 4. Tiger Mask 4 has 4. ACH has 4. Volador Jr. has 4. Kushida has 2. And Bushi has 2. So that whole division, that whole block, Block B, has a lot to go yet. You know, with Desperado and Kanemaru being tied at 6 apiece, we don't know who's going to represent that group yet. Will Ospreay against anybody would be phenomenal, but I actually think they really, when they were booking this, they really should have put Ricochet over in Block B. And if Will Ospreay is going to be in the final, it should have been against Ricochet. And for the simple fact that last year, that match, those two in the ring, was what everybody talked about for the better part of 9 months. To the point that Vader got mad and wanted to face Will Ospreay in the independent circuit, which he did. Ospreay took the loss to do the right thing for the veteran. And now you still have Vader every once in a while complaining about him. But just my opinion, I would have had Will Ospreay and Ricochet win this thing, or at least go into the finals in this thing, out of respect for the attention they brought to the New Japan brand last year when they had that instant classic in the tournament. Just an FYI, the Sound Off line is closing in about 7 minutes. So please make sure you get any questions you have in as soon as possible. 267-642-1160. And if you are going to be getting started on the voting for our tag team tournament, go to frolifeplanning.com/FroPodcast, and you will see a link right in the dead center top of the page for where you click to get into the tournament links. So check that out if you have not already. Another story making news this week. We cannot get enough of this because it's exciting no matter what happens. 5 Star Wrestling, they're getting close to their June 10th 128-man tournament kicking off. And as you heard last week, they are putting the full court press on CM Punk to come in. Well, he better hurry up because you don't want him to spend all their money. And they this week signed Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam will be a part of that tournament. If you remember, a few months ago, there was a rumor that Rob Van Dam may be coming back to WWE in August. Well, this would indicate that probably isn't going to be the case since the tournament doesn't close until December. And I can't imagine that they would have RVD lose in one of the earliest rounds. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Just my opinion. If you're going to pay the kind of money you'd have to pay to get somebody like RVD, you would want to feature them, not bury them. But the big news this week was not only that they made an offer of $1 million to CM Punk to come out and be a part of the pay-per-view or of the series of events, but that they are open to discussing it with Dana White and see, they made reference to Conor McGregor being able to go into boxing. If he can go into boxing, why can't CM Punk go into wrestling? Boxing is a real sport. Wrestling is a choreographed, staged exhibition. Why would you take a chance on Conor McGregor getting knocked out and hurting his image and not give CM Punk the opportunity to come into the professional wrestling world that everybody claims is so fake to begin with? And he would earn double what he earned in UFC. And Dana White keeps saying that he's not going to let Punk fight again anyways. Well, let the guy out of his contract then if you're never going to fight the guy. That way he can either go ahead and do this thing, jump back into the ring, or he opens up his opportunities to go to Bellator. I think that is the reason UFC hasn't let him go. They don't want him going to Bellator, where Bellator will be more than happy to let him fight as many times as he wants. Win, lose, or draw, he's going to bring in fans. He's going to put, JR used to talk about putting a butt every 18 inches. He'll do that, whether he wins or loses. So that's the only motivation I could see for UFC to hold things up, is to keep him from going to Bellator. But at this point, if he decides to go into wrestling, that would be phenomenal. The next tidbit of wrestling news for the day, Brie Bella, apparently she just gave birth to her little girl and is already training for a return to the ring. That is huge. I think that people would like to see her add to the Divas Revolution. I shouldn't say Divas anymore, the Women's Revolution. She has been such a focal point of that division for such a long time, and with the brand shakeup, I don't feel like it was as successful as they wanted it to be, and I think both brands suffered for it in some way. Adding her to the mix would be phenomenal, and bringing Nikki back at some point on the opposite brand, that's just my opinion. I'd bring the Bellas back on opposing brands. It's almost like bringing one talent to both brands, but you're really bringing two people to separate brands. But that's just my opinion. I would bring them back if you could, but it sounds like Brie is really getting herself in shape, ready to go to try to come back to the ring. time for what looks like it'll be our last comment from, I love this name already, Evil Live, which looks like evil and then spelling it backwards or something like that. Evil Live 9889, who thinks I'm too big of a fan of old wrestling and should pay more attention to new wrestling. I'm not saying this as an abrasive response. I'm saying this being honest. Anybody who knows me, the buddy I was with today at the show would be the first one to tell you. I could go back all the way to George Hackenschmidt and tell you everything that's happened in pro wrestling from its incarnation in the carnival circus world all the way through now. And I could tell you all the major independent stars. I could tell you what's going on in Progress and XWX and all these different places all over the world. New Japan Pro Wrestling. Down in New Zealand, I watch their shows. I watch Africa. I watch stuff in South America, CMLL, AAA, Lucha Underground. You name it, I watch it. I don't have a problem with any of the product that's out there. I'm a huge fan of Ricochet and Will Ospreay and Marty Scurll and Matt Riddle and everything that Evolve is doing and all these different things going on. Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, you name it, I'm a fan. Here, that's my issue. I don't have a problem with anything that's going on now. My problem is this. People go for what is the easiest to find. So here's the thing. If I turn on my YouTube channel, right, and I'm going to look for a video to watch, if I type in WWE, I'm going to get all the results from Raw and SmackDown. If I type in the word wrestling, I'm going to get a bunch of stuff from Raw and SmackDown. If I dig a little deeper, I'll get some Ring of Honor and some Impact Wrestling. I got to actually dig relatively hard, which is sad and pathetic, to get some good New Japan stuff, unless I know how to spell names exactly and get in the right searches. But what I think you miss when I talk about older teams a lot, and I bring up the history of the business, is that you guys, a lot of the younger audience, and this is not a derogatory thing, a lot of the younger audience has really missed some phenomenal wrestling history. When you put on a match like Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Savage at WrestleMania 3, someone who watches that today is just as entertained as people were back in 1987 when the match took place. But a lot of young guys haven't seen that match. And when they want to go into YouTube and look up a match, they don't look up old stuff. They look up what they're familiar with, what they're comfortable with. So when I talk at length about old stuff, old wrestling, as this person put it, I don't do that from a place of disrespect for what the current product is. I love the current product. Unlike a lot of the wrestlers who've been complaining, the whole Rip Rogers, Randy Orton, even now Ryback this week was jumping on the bandwagon complaining about indie wrestling. I believe that there's different flavors of wrestling, just like there is every other thing in the world. There's different baseball teams around the world that play a very different way. Basketball organizations are different in different places. Hockey organizations are different places. Soccer. So whatever it is your sport is that you're into, depending on where you look at it in the world, it's very different. And when it comes to wrestling, one of the hottest places in the world to watch wrestling is the United States. I'm not saying they get the best action all the time. What I'm saying, or even the most loyal fans, what I'm saying is when you look at the number of hours that professional wrestling is on mainstream television or big networks, there is more in the United States than any other country in the world. So when I speak about this, if you are a fan listening right now in Japan, if you're a fan right now listening in Mexico, if you're a fan listening in Auckland, New Zealand, or somewhere like that, and I said those three because, to my surprise this week, I found out I have a very large following in those three places. Thank you to those people. I am in no way ever wanting you to think that I think the quality of your wrestling is not as good as a lot of the stuff you see in the United States. Far from that. I actually think sometimes you find the best wrestling looking at independents from around the world. What I do is when I'm doing these shows and I'm bringing up topics, I really want people to know what's out there that has happened before, and so that they can go and watch it and go find it. And then when you see a match that came out 25, 30 years ago and you're blown away by it and you've never seen it before, it might as well have just happened today. And then you become a fan of people that you've never heard of. I guarantee you there's people in listening to this podcast, who have never heard of Duke the Dumpster Droese. Okay, and he was a horrible character in the 90s for WWE. But prior to becoming that horrible character, he was a guy who ran the territories and actually did a really nice job. He was a pretty decent worker. Billy Jack Haynes was a wrestler who was in WWE. He's thoroughly nuts now. The guy's insane. But back in 1987, he looked great. I mean, he used to have this black hat with green or yellow trim. He'd come to the ring. He was from the Pacific Northwest, and he had a body like no other. And They had a moment there where he was going to team up with Ken Patera, and there was talk of giving he and Ken Patera the World Tag Team titles. Billy Jack Haynes was a big thing, and then he quickly disappeared from WWE amid the whole steroid scandal, and really in mainstream wrestling wasn't heard from again. He did shows, but he was never a major star again. And, young guys who've been watching wrestling and who were born in 2000 or sooner, they probably, most of them don't even know who Billy Jack Haynes is. I encourage you, go back and look up Billy Jack Haynes. A lot of them don't know, Mark and Jay Youngblood or Wahoo McDaniels, or, they've heard of Superfly Jimmy Snuka, but to them it's the guy in the leopard print stuff who was way too over the hill the last time they saw him on TV. Superfly Jimmy Snuka jumping off a cage, squashing Don Morocco is classic, but he had much more stuff other than just that moment, Even going back a few years, okay? You go back to when Chris Jericho wrestled against Ricky Steamboat, Roddy Piper, and Jimmy Snuka at WrestleMania. Remember, he took on all three in a handicap match. Steamboat had been out of action since like the early 90s. He comes back, he's like 50, and he looked like he hadn't missed a day. He was awesome. And a lot of people were like, who's this guy? Like, they didn't even know who Ricky Steamboat really was. They heard the name, because the name has huge recognition, but they'd never seen him wrestle. It's like when I listen to my students in my class who talk about Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time. I'm like, how many games did you ever watch of Michael Jordan? Well, I watched the highlight reel. Well, yeah, that's great. I could put together a highlight reel too. But what you really want to see, when you want to develop a love and a passion for somebody, a sports athlete, you need to see them all the time. And when you see them, you see their flaws, you see their perks, and you can really attach yourself to somebody. And that's what I try to do, is I try to introduce my audience to people that they in the past may never have considered. And I hope that I broaden your understanding of some of the talents that are out there, because there's some people out there that you probably have never heard of. I know that one of my listeners in particular, the guy who was giving me busting my stones earlier, I know he goes out of his way to look up stuff on YouTube all the time. And I love it, because whenever he shoots me a message and lets me know what's going on and what he sees and stuff that he's really entertained by, I think to myself, like, gosh, I know he's my age. I'm 40, he's my age. But I know my students that I talk to, or the young people that I've communicated with, a lot of them don't realize what's out there. And I'm telling you, it's real easy. You go to one older video that really blows your mind, and then all of a sudden there's like 15 more on the right side of YouTube. You click away and click away and click. One leads to another, to another, to another. I encourage you to look up Wayne Ferris versus Randy Savage. That's the Honky Tonk Man long before he was the Honky Tonk Man. Look up Kamala when he was originally in wrestling. Kamala versus Andre the Giant. There's a match in a cage that'll blow your mind. Or Killer Khan. How many people don't know who Killer Khan was? Killer Khan was huge in the early 80s. Battled Hulk Hogan for a short period of time. The Missing Link. General Skandar Akbar and just all these talents that people nowadays, it's not their fault. It's before their time. But that's where somebody like me comes in. I try to share with you guys the personalities, the tag teams, the information that'll help you become as big a fan as I am. I know that wrestling has been a huge part of my life, my entire existence, pretty much, since I was 4 years old. And I want to make sure that the people who are out there who listen to this podcast, and thank you again, because I love every one of you who tunes in every week, I want you guys to be as big of fans as I am. A lot of people at the beginning of this little rant that I've had, and I apologize, I'm kind of going totally off what my plan was. But, I just, when I said the name George Hackenschmidt, there's a lot of people who had no idea who George Hackenschmidt is. George Hackenschmidt is the reason we have wrestling. He was a guy who unified all of the real wrestling championships around the world and integrated it into this business of professional wrestling and created the real world heavyweight championship, the first one. And his contributions are immeasurable. And you can look up pictures, go to Google Images and pull up something for George Hackenschmidt. He's great. He's got a body like you wouldn't believe on a guy who hasn't been who was around back in the 1800s before steroids and all that stuff was an issue. So people who are, you look at the muscle heads now and you're like, oh, they're all roided up. This is a guy who did it holistically, and he actually wrote books about it and everything else. So I got a comment popped up here from my loyal listener saying that he's watching the Samoan SWAT team versus Dr. Death and the Road Warriors right now. I have not seen that match, so I'm encouraging everybody listening to this podcast, check that out. Samoan SWAT team versus Dr. Death and the Road Warriors. It's good stuff. Thank you so much for contributing a specific link, because I was trying to think of one off the top of my head. All right, so that is pretty much all the time we have for tonight. Don't forget to shoot over to our Patreon page, patreon.com. Somebody said they didn't know how to spell it. /Fro Wrestling Podcast. Patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast. If you want to become a patron to the page, we appreciate anybody who can. I don't care if you're contributing $1 a month. Everything helps us, and I am infinitely thankful to anyone who can do that. Everything you do for us helps us expand our technology, bring in better equipment, bring in multiple equipment. I was actually speaking today at that show that I was at. I spoke to the promoter there. I'm going to be talking to him later this week, early next week, about possibly doing some interviews with his talent. I would love to do a live broadcast from one of his shows. I'm going to present that idea to him. To do some of these things, I need to have some mobile stuff and make it a little more presentable, and that stuff all costs cash. And let's face it, I'm doing this stuff, right now for free. So I would love to be able to find a way to generate revenue to help us expand what it is that we're doing here. And I hope you guys enjoy what we do here. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with me Tuesday. That's when we'll have our next episode up. We'll run down all the news, rumors, Raw review. Special thanks, as always, out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all of our music and sound effects used in today's show. Today's podcast is sponsored by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with Sketchy People. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games by going to www.thegamecrafter.com/games/sketchypeople to pick up your copy today. And AlleyRepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all of your classic skee-ball, pinball, or arcade game needs. Make sure that you shoot over to our website if you are looking to get into college, university, or you just want to find a new trade. www.frolifeplanning.com is for you. Right now, special all summer long, your first initial evaluation is free. So we will get on the phone, we will go over a questionnaire that seeks to find out what your interests are. What is it that you want to do with your life? What kind of education are we looking to get? And I can use that information to give you some informed decisions about how to be successful in that next stage of your growth. And if you want to do that, by all means, they're on that frolifeplanning.com. Click on the contact tab and shoot me your information. I'll be more than happy to contact you with a free consultation over the phone. Because Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, it's for tomorrow, and it's for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro. I want to thank every single one of you, no matter where you're coming in from, where all over the world. Thank you for taking time with us tonight. I appreciate whenever you guys tune into these live episodes and you shoot me your questions. It means the world to me. If you're looking for more wrestling news and rumors, I encourage you to go to www.tsjsports.com/WWE for some of the latest articles on the world of professional wrestling. And until next time, everybody, I will see y'all in the next episode. We'll cover Raw. Wednesday night will be SmackDown, and then we'll be back with another live episode next Saturday night, 9 p.m. That'll be our regular time. The only time that may change is when we have pay-per-view weekends, because we're trying to make sure we bring you all the news and rumors as often and efficiently as we can. So until next time, take care, everybody, and have a great night.